Welcome, everyone. We are so happy to have you here. My name is Cassie Flynn, and I am the Strategic Advisor on Climate Change at the United Nations Development Program. And today we are celebrating learning. We are talking about what it takes to really understand big solutions on climate change and how we can help everyone in the world to be advocates, really learning the lessons, in particular from young people. Young people have been leading the way on climate action, and this is a moment to really bring together some of these lessons learned, hear about some of these stories, and talk about what it means to learn about climate change in the here and now. And today I am so happy because I'm joined by a variety of partners. And the first is Gautam Narasimhan from UNICEF. And then we have Paloma Costa, part of the Secretary General's Youth Envoy Group on climate change. We have Ify Mercedes Rodriguez Urutrutu, a Mock COP26 organizer and climate activist with UKSCN. Then we have Mock COP delegates, Jamie Hunter from Canada, Nellie Barron from Dominica, Cherub Soy from Kenya, Nick Lischak from Slovenia, as well as Lena Belly Le Grieux from Denmark. We also have our good friend Abdul Wahab Koulibaly from UNESCO. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. It is such a pleasure to talk with you. And as many people know, that this really started for us at UNDP with this idea of Mission 1.5. And today we are celebrating the launch of the learning module that is associated with Mission 1.5. Mission 1.5 was a way for everyone to learn about the big picture climate solutions and to be able to vote on what they think their government should do when it comes to climate action. Whether that is helping to make farms more sustainable or transitioning us all to renewable energy or ensuring that hundreds of millions of people around the world have access to green jobs. There are all sorts of ways that we can be thinking and talking about these solutions to the climate crisis. And this vote has been very, very important. And we've seen now over 5 million people have voted on Mission 1.5. And we're also getting a ton of questions about, well, why is it that Indigenous and local communities play an important role in protecting nature? Why is it that young girls can be a critical agent of change when it comes to thinking about transport? And this is when we created this learning module. We created this website where everyone can really learn about some of these big solutions and what they mean for our future. And so today we get to talk all about learning. And we are going to really break this up into two pieces. The first is we're going to hear from some of our close partners on Mission 1.5 and their journey about learning. And then we're going to hear from some of the Mock COP delegates who are just even right now having some of these big conversations about what it's really going to take for the world to transition. So with that, I am going to hand it over to our very first speaker. Gautam, over to you. My question for you is, we all know that young people are playing a huge role in the climate discussions around the world. Can you speak about why it's so important that they are part of the conversation and communicating to others about climate action?
Cassie, thank you very much. And Mock COP delegates, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. And Cassie, the question is a great one. And they're exactly, I'd say there are probably at least three things of why it is absolutely critical that young people have to be part of this conversation, communicating about this. First, children and young people have the most to lose from climate change and environmental degradation. They're the ones who will be the worst impacted. We already know that, for example, 90% of the health impacts of climate change are likely to be borne by children under 5. We know that the majority of the world's children already breathe air that is polluted. And children are different than adults. They're not just little adults, but physiologically, developmentally, their bodies are still growing, their minds are still growing. And these sorts of impacts affect them far more. The second reason is that it is the right of a young person to be able to safely share their views concerning them on things that concern them. And survey after survey shows that climate change and the environment is one of the key areas that children and young people care about most. Children and young people have a right as enshrined in the Convention of the Rights of the Child, one of the most widely ratified instruments there is, to be able to safely share their views and to have a right to peaceful assembly. And really would like to salute the enthusiasm, the energy of young people who are in their millions out on the streets, trying to advocate for things that adults really should have been doing. And the third, and probably the most important, is that the only lasting solution for the climate crisis is if, for young people, environmental sustainability and economic development go hand in hand and just become the new business as usual. Because if we don't do that, all we're doing is really just trying to put band-aids on these huge wounds. We can talk about having small incremental changes here and there, but until environmental sustainability and climate action become part and parcel of how we live, how we work, and how we generate our economies, then ultimately there is going to be no lasting solution. But would very much, yeah, UNICEF, great working with you and UNDP, and most importantly with all the young people here, and looking forward to working with you more. But over really to the start of the show now to the MOPCOP delegates. Thanks very much, Cassie.
Thanks so much, Gautam. Really fantastic to hear about some of this work that UNICEF is doing. And now, Paloma Costa, you are at the center of climate discussions in the UN as a member of the Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group. How do you see the importance of youth in the fight for climate and advocating for climate action?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. Well, when we think about youth participation, it is key to remember we are the conscience in the work decision makers do. We are action, and we prove it in so many forms. We took over the streets, and now we are taking over the screens, and we will keep shouting so loud that everyone that here will only be able to hear us. As I come from Brazil, I can literally say our house is on fire. But the problem is that we still need to fight each and every day for being part of the discussions, even though different norms guarantee our important and participation. Mostly of the times, when we are included in the discussions, we are just there, filling out a spot. But our voices are not incorporated in the final processes and demands in a binding and deliberative way. And it's important to remember that participation means accountability, transparency, and education. So we understand the information available. That's why I like so much the initiative of Mission 1.5, because this gives us information to keep fighting for what we want to. So I encourage all young people here to keep fighting for our voices. We should be proud of ourselves because we are making things different from those in position of power. We are inclusive, we are bold, and we are action. I know many of you are really tired to keep fighting for something so trivial as participating. But remember that this is precisely what is inspiring world leaders, communities, young people all across the globe. And in a time that the world needs so much imagination to survive pandemic, we are the creative, conscious, reforestating minds and bringing answers and sustainable energy necessary to change the paths of our own history. Thank you.
Thank you, Paloma, and thank you so much for your leadership on this. As you said, it's the young people that are bold and the conscience of this, and I think that being able to help everyone in the world to be learning the lessons from young people is so important right now. And now I am turning to Ife Mercedes Rodriguez Urruchurtu. Ife, you've been supporting the MOPCOP in the organizing side and acting on climate to try to teach future generations. Can you let us know what you think is the role education plays in climate action?
Absolutely. So hello, I'm Aoife, and so I'm part of this campaign called Teach the Future, and it's all youth led, and I think that's such a core element to it because it's us taking that initiative to actually engage our politicians, to lobby, to actually try and implement that change at the systemic level, while also having a presence in the public sphere. But essentially, well, at least within the UK, and I can imagine it's very, very similar globally as well, the education system means that the climate change is actually very limited to specific subjects. In the UK, that's geography and the sciences. However, not everyone is scientifically inclined, and so it actually cuts off a lot of people from being able to learn about climate change and the climate crisis, and also just have that interest. And so we believe that we actually really need to take away those barriers, and as you know, because it really shouldn't be something that is optional, it should be a compulsory topic. And so we believe that this is, it's because every young person must go through a contemporary schooling system, which will actually prepare them to go into green industry. So it's not just about thinking about the education itself, but also how that's going to impact their jobs, how it's going to impact their futures. And these topics, it's not just about talking about the science, because I feel like, at least in my own experience, I've learned about it, in chemistry. I remember learning about climate change in geography and about like the greenhouse effect. And I think this focus on the science, it really neglects the overt topics such as those of colonialism and how the climate crisis is disproportionately affecting those in the global south, in MAPA countries, most affected people in areas, and like throughout history as well. And so we can actually learn about these things within our subjects, whether it's more on the subconscious scale in like maths, for example, where you can learn about problem solving with real life examples as questions, or in history where you actually learn about colonialism, when you actually learn about how the climate crisis intersects with that, and then moving forward, you're learning about how that intersects with other crises. So yeah, it's such a huge element, a huge aspect. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Aoife. And I think that what you said there is so important about the way all of these things connect. And certainly the climate crisis is one that didn't just happen out of nowhere, that there's been a series of decisions that have led us to this point. And certainly in thinking about some of the solutions, that interconnectivity of history and of the science and of the politics, and being able to pull all of those together is a key part of this learning. So thank you so much for sharing that. And so now I am going to turn to some of the mock COP delegates. We are so happy to have these delegates with us to share some of their journey about learning about climate and how to act on climate change and the importance of climate in education. In some of the conversations that I've been really fortunate to have with some mock COP delegates, they've shared a lot about how sometimes getting information on climate change is not very easy, that it's not in some of these really traditional places that we find it. It's not in school books. It's not a course that is necessarily taught in school. But instead, it's a moment where people have to find out information for themselves. And that results in a journey in thinking about how they want to address climate in their life, and how they want to talk about it, and how they want to be advocates. And so we're so happy to have these mock COP delegates from around the world. And I'm going to start with Jamie Hunter from Canada. Jamie, was climate change part of your education growing up in Canada?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Cassie. Yeah, definitely not really a part of the formal education system here in Canada, and it still isn't, as far as I know. And I mean, I personally have known about climate change kind of as long as I can remember, just as in I knew that it existed, but that I never really knew kind of its full impacts and really what it meant until probably about 5 years ago or so. I remember hearing about the Paris Agreement actually affected my learning of it, because I became aware of this kind of conference going on, and I wanted to know more about what's really being discussed here. And why is this such an important thing? And that was when I really took it upon myself to learn more about the impacts of climate change and what we should be doing about it. And I remember feeling kind of shocked that I hadn't heard about this before, because it was such a major crisis that was facing us, and why was I only really learning about it now? And I guess after that, I decided that I really wanted to get involved with doing something about it. So a couple of years ago, I became part of my local Fridays for Future group, and then earlier this year, I was a co-founder of Stop Ecocide Canada. But really, with all those things, I wonder, well, what would have happened if I hadn't decided to look into it some more myself? And there must be so many people who never really did that, or never had that opportunity. And to me, that's really a shame, because it means that we end up with a society where people may have heard about climate change and kind of understand its impacts. But even when we do talk about it, I really echo that sentiment of, we focus a lot on the science, which is really important, obviously, but it's also not the thing which really appeals to people's emotions. And that's really important. It's the thing which really drives me to act is hearing the stories of how people are experiencing it. And I think that's a really key thing to focus on. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jamie. And certainly bringing that idea of learning can happen in all ways. And like you said, the storytelling about climate and hearing about impacts, those are ways that we all can learn more, I think, in hearing all of these different voices. And so now I go to Cherop Soy, Mock COP26 delegate for Kenya. So Cherop, can you talk about your journey, what it was to learn about climate from Kenya?
Thank you, Cassie. So when I came across the climate education theme on mock COP application, I knew I had to apply because I'm very passionate about the environment. So much so that I started documenting my journey on going green on my blog, Eco Warrior Kenya. So in Kenya, our school system growing up did not incorporate climate education, and all I learned about climate education was from my parents, who learned from their parents. Well, I come from the global south, and I come from an ethnic community that relies on farming for survival, hence rich indigenous knowledge that I feel should be conserved for future generations. And upon reflecting on my life and my passion, I decided to draft a children's curriculum for elementary school children to teach them about extinction, pollution, and sustainable energy. And it's important to plant that seed when they're young, because perhaps it'll carry them through their life and inspire them to be kinder to the environment when they grow up. Well, my 5-year plan involves this curriculum, and through this experience, I would like to draft a children's book series on the same. And on a side note, personally, I love playing games during my free time, and Mission 1.5 was an excellent choice for someone who wants to be entertained, all while gaining knowledge on climate change. And maybe in the future, it can have more levels like coastal regions and for indigenous communities, or an African version, because I know climate change affects us all, but it affects us differently. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherop. I love that idea of being able to go further with an African version of Mission 1.5, for example, because you're right, climate change affects us all so differently, and we need to ensure that we're learning about and we're also learning about these stories that we just talked about. So now, Nick Liszczak, the delegate from Slovenia, can you tell us about your experience there when it comes to learning about climate?
Yes, thanks, Cassie. Yes, I'm from Slovenia, and to be honest, I learned about climate change mostly through informal ways. Okay, I'm a bit older. I'm 24 at the moment, but there still is no formal way of climate education. which is really sad in Slovenia, especially because we are a really small country. We have a very good education system, which is free, and we are super proud of it. But still, we're lacking behind in climate education. So my reason, I don't really remember the first time I found about climate change. I was probably really young. But the thing is that at first it was I was learning about it out of curiosity, you know, like everyone. But then soon after it became like a necessity, you know, because when you think about your future, you have to incorporate it, you know, and everybody thinks about their future. So this learning about climate change, although it's interesting, it's also from a psychological perspective, it's really full of fear and full of uncertainty, full of hopelessness. So that's why I also decided with friends. I'm also a scout. So we co-founded through Scouts an organization called Greeners in Slovenia, where we teach young kids about climate change, but as well we give them the strength and all the knowledge and all that is needed for them to take action. So we're kind of trying to empower them, try to empower green initiatives coming from the kids, just standing there for them and giving them the structure they need to fight it. But yeah, what else should I say? Like one important thing I think in Slovenia, and I probably also around the world, is that we have to realize that our current decision makers, our current politicians, like they didn't learn about climate change in school, you know. So we also should not forget that we also have to educate adults about climate change, because the action is needed, like not today, but like yesterday already. So yeah, this is also an important thing I wanted to point out about climate education. And lastly, what one thought for the end is like, how can you critique, you know, because we're all learned in school that the most important part is to think critically, you know, about stuff. So how can you critique something like climate change, which is like a super big and super complex phenomenon, without having a sufficient knowledge about it? You know, if you don't know something about the thing, then you can also not critique, and you cannot take action. So I think it's really important to start facing the facts, start educating about climate change, and just taking action.
Thank you, Nick. This relates so much, I think, to some of the themes that we are hearing from everyone's learning journey. That this struggle of climate change is happening all around us. We are seeing the impacts here and now. And how do we get more information about this when the traditional ways of learning just aren't really available to us, and you're not hearing about it necessarily, you know, as you said, sort of in the schools, and maybe sometimes the adults aren't really talking about it. The adults don't really know as much as they need to when it comes to climate action. So how we can use this education and use this power to be able to help push the world to be bolder. And so now I turn to Lena, MOP COP26 delegate from Denmark. I hear that you are involved in a number of different interesting initiatives when it comes to education and climate. What do you think of the role of informal education when it comes to climate action?
Hi, Cassie. Hi, everyone. So I grew up in France, and much like the others, in France, we barely have any form of climate education in the formal curriculum. So today, the reason why I am a climate activist is because I was lucky enough to grow up in a neighborhood and in a household that had tons of links with environmental and social associations that were actually taking that educative role and teaching people about sustainability. The first formal climate education I ever received was throughout my university studies. So I think it's really important, like the other says, to include climate education in the formal curriculum, and I cannot agree enough with that. However, I also think it's so important to consider that these curricula are very static, they are slow to change, while our climate reality is super dynamic, it's always changing. And that's why I think that grassroots organizations have an absolutely crucial role to play in climate education too. So for instance, I'm part of an organization called Rethinking Economics, and we kind of have two branches of action. On one hand, we bring a critique that the economics being taught at school are not rooted in the environmental reality and the crisis that we have. So we lobby for more diverse and inclusive perspectives in the curriculum. And on the other hand, we also educate the general public about the economics underpinning the climate crisis. I think it was Eva already who talked about the intersectionality of disciplines. I'll just add economics to that. And for now, like many organizations, we operate independently. And so we try to gain recognition and legitimacy so we can expand our operations. But I think we would reach the most potential if the state and the institutions responsible for education were to actually recognize the legitimacy and the usefulness of resistance movement in our democracy and engage with us with an open mind so we can help each other in this educative role. I think that activist education campaigns should actually be complementary to the formal curricula, so they can bring in more dynamism and the ability to adjust the content of the education through criticism and exploration of alternatives. In a few years' time, hopefully sooner than later, climate concerns will underpin every single governance decision that's made. Without an educated population who understand the risks and dynamics of climate change, but also who know which governance practices benefit which interest group, we won't be able to have an inclusive democracy. And once again, there'll be parts of the population that are will be left behind. So climate education is absolutely indispensable for a common future. And I think that formal and activist education should work hand in hand for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This intersection, certainly, of education and democracy is so important. This idea of being able to have people be educated, to understand solutions, to know what they need to do to be able to participate in civic life when it comes to climate. And as you said, sometimes formal education can be static when climate is, we are seeing it evolve and change every single day. So thank you so much for that. And now I turn to Nellie Barron, COP26 delegate from Dominica. I hear that you are a teacher by profession, and tell me a bit more about this curriculum in Dominica.
Hi everybody, I'm Nelista. It doesn't really have much of a formal education or really climate change in the curriculum. There's no such thing. It really depends on the teacher. So if you have a teacher who is interested in the climate, who is aware of what is going on and can make the link to the changes that are happening to climate change, then sure, you'll be able to, the teacher will be able to pass on that information to the students. A question, is it really loud? Are you all able to hear me clearly?
It's pretty loud, but you just keep going. And
because I'm on class right now, I'm sorry.
There might be a lot of learning going on behind you.
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just saying that it really doesn't have climate change in our curriculum. You do not really learn about the environment in the curriculum. But because I guess we're from a small island where we're big on nature and all of that, seeing that Dominica is known as the nature isle of the Caribbean. So you will learn to protect the environment, to show some appreciation for what we have, our natural environment, our ecosystem and all of that. But to teach them about it, that's not being done. Especially at the lower levels. For me, I joined the 4-H at the primary level, so I was able to really get into it and be interested in it. And I continued with that through high school where I did geography. But even then, when I wanted to do my SBA, that's a school-based assignment that we would do in 4th and 5th form, I could not get in the information to do the things that I really wanted to do my study on what I really wanted. So we also need to get some form of storing all the information to make it available to people who are interested. And again, the interest comes from them getting the information at school from a very young age and to have it continuous. So you start with the simplest things in the primary level, and then as they're moving up, you give them more information, but you make them aware of what is going on. Because yes, they talk about it on the radio, they talk about it in the media, but are we listening? Because sometimes even you will see people say, oh, it's getting hotter. Oh, we're having more hurricanes. But they're not really making the connection to climate change. And that is what we really need so that people can focus on it and really do something about it. Because more and more you find with the younger generations, they're not as interested in the climate as we were during my time of going to school. You see them throwing trash all over the place. All over. So I think it is very important. It is very, very important. And especially seeing that we have most public schools, not really private schools. So I think it's very important that the government would really put climate change into the curriculum so that everybody can be on the same pace to have it monitored so you know what everybody knows. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And in the fact that you touched on also this long-term learning journey, that it's not just about sort of learning something when at one moment of your life, but actually continuing to make these connections, and about, you know, it's a very warm season and we're also having more hurricanes than we have in the past, and being able to have that be something that you're learning over time is so critical. So thank you so much for that. And now we unfortunately we could talk all day, but we do have to turn toward our closing piece, and we are so happy to have Abdul Wahab Coulibaly with us from UNESCO. And UNESCO is such a leading organization on education. And Abdul, I'd love to hear what you think are the potential education, including informal, online, in-person resources that are out there to combat climate change. Abdul, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the presenters before me. Yes, the question is really legitimate. So I will rather focus on a UNESCO climate change education program we have. I would like to start by saying that climate change is one of the biggest challenges of our times. You know, this has been mentioned by most of the speakers. And for UNESCO, education is an essential element of a global response to climate change, in the sense that it helps young people understand and address the impact of global warming. Consequently, because of this, UNESCO promotes the educational response to climate change as part of its program on education for sustainable development, and for which we, I mean UNESCO, we have a leader agency among the other UN agencies. Climate change education, as you know, it empowers everyone with the knowledge, skills, values, and attitude that are needed to mitigate climate change and adapt to its impacts. And I think most of the participants more or less alluded to it. So as a component of education for sustainable development, climate change education addresses the cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral learning dimensions. And at UNESCO, our ESD program also aims to help people understand the impact of global warming today and increase climate literacy, specifically among young people. Just to conclude very quickly, I would like to say that UNESCO works on climate change education, focuses on three main areas. We have advocacy, we do a lot of advocacy. We also have some policy guidance, and we work on knowledge production and also exchange a lot with the other UN agencies and also with all the partners that are involved in climate change education. And we also work with a country to support them, and also we build a lot of partnership. So I would like to say that UNESCO is delighted to be a partner in your journey. I'm talking about Mission 1.5, to support the youth in the actions toward mitigating the impact of climate change education. Of climate change, So for more information and UNESCO work on climate change, you can find everything on our website, UNESCO website, and also the Mission 1.5 website. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul. And certainly we have just loved having UNESCO as a partner in our learning journey when it comes to learning about climate, and certainly with Mission 1.5. And thank you so much to all of the speakers. It has been a real moment of learning for me as I've heard a bit about your journeys, and I know that there's so much to be said about what it means to actually be learning and growing when it comes to climate action right now. And we hope that with Mission 1.5, this can be another resource for everyone, that this can be a tool in the toolbox as you are thinking about your advocacy on climate action, as you are thinking about what it takes to really start to move the conversation and move the needle and be addressing these impacts that we're seeing all around us every single day. So now I just want to take a couple of more minutes to introduce a video that, as I mentioned, the learning module of Mission 1.5 launches today. You can find it at mission1.5learn.org. And this is where you can see all of these different big picture solutions when it comes to climate action, these big policy choices that world leaders are discussing in this global crisis. And you can learn about what they mean and what they might lead to when it comes to being able to make decisions about our future. It is available now in over 100 languages. We are so happy about this, and it's something that we feel has been really important to us. And it's been really led by this partnership and this collaboration with educators and young people and advocates and activists and people that are really seeing that this could potentially be something that could be a resource to others. So with that, I would like to hand it over to our friends that will play this video. Thank you. And with that, thank you so very much to everyone who has joined us out there. And this is to say that we are all with you, for all of us in our learning journeys. You are not alone. That sometimes these learning journeys start as saying, hey, I need to know more about this, and I don't know where to start. And as you can hear from all of the inspiring stories that we had today, that other people have been in your footsteps. Other people have been in your shoes. And so please do reach out. Please do stay in touch. Please do keep learning, and please stay safe. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a really wonderful day.